Welcome everyone to this exciting journey into the world of rare coins, where tiny pieces of copper can hold stories worth millions, and today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating coins in numismatic history, the 1930 DeWitt penny, a humble 1-cent coin that under normal circumstances would be worth just face value, but because of extraordinary errors, minting mistakes, and the unique possibilities that surround it, this particular coin is valued at an astonishing $10 million, making it one of the most sought-after treasures in the coin collecting community. And in this script we will explore every tiny detail that contributes to this mind-blowing valuation, starting with the background of the Wheat Penny series, which began in 1909 under the authorization of President Theodore Roosevelt, who wanted a redesign of American coinage, entrusting Victor David Brenner with creating the iconic Lincoln design that debuted with wheat stalks on the reverse, a design symbolizing prosperity and unity. But as the years went on, errors crept into the minting process due to the limitations of technology of that era, and by 1930 at the Denver Mint, unusual mistakes combined with historical context to create something far beyond ordinary. Because the Great Depression was shaking the economy, the Mint was under pressure to maintain coin production with limited resources, worn-out dies, and human errors that inevitably slipped through, and this is where the 1930 DeWitt penny's story begins, a coin whose surface reveals anomalies that experts classify as doubled dies, repunched mint marks, planchet errors, off-center strikes, and die cracks, all of which when combined create a once-in-a-lifetime rarity. But what makes this specific coin valued at $10 million is not just one mistake but the layering of multiple mistakes that interact in ways collectors almost never encounter. For example, certain specimens of the 1930 D penny show a doubled die obverse where Lincoln's profile appears slightly shadowed, with doubling noticeable around his eye, beard, and the date, creating a ghostly second impression, and then on top of that doubling, the mint mark, D for Denver appears to have been repunched, with one punch slightly north of the other, giving it a doubled appearance that is easily spotted with magnification, a feature highly prized by error collectors, but it doesn't stop there. Because some of these pennies were struck on improper planchets, possibly left over from earlier years or foreign coin stock, leading to wrong metal compositions that affect weight and color. So while most 1930 D pennies are a standard bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, error coins have shown unusual alloy mixes leading to shades that appear darker or lighter, making them stand out, and certain examples even weigh slightly less, hinting at experimental blanks or transition errors. And when you combine these with die cracks across the fields, particularly on Lincoln's shoulder or across the wheat ears on the reverse, you get a coin riddled with personality, a coin that is a physical document of the mistakes of its time, and this accumulation of anomalies is what propels it far above face value, because rarity and uniqueness in coin collecting translates directly into desirability and price. And with the 1930 DeWitt penny, the rarity is compounded by survival numbers, since very few coins escaped into circulation in such condition, as most with such major errors were melted down or went unnoticed and lost over decades of circulation, making the surviving ones that much more extraordinary. And what makes the $10 million valuation believable in today's market is the appetite of collectors and investors who are always seeking the next big discovery. Coins that combine history, rarity, condition, and error are a perfect storm for astronomical value, and when graded by top agencies like PCGS or NGC, specimens in mint state condition with visible errors can command jaw-dropping premiums, especially when they are unique or nearly unique, and so the 1930 DeWitt penny stands as an icon, with experts pointing out that the context of the Great Depression also amplifies its narrative value, since any coin from that era holds a reminder of hardship and resilience, and this coin, bearing multiple mistakes, symbolizes imperfection during a time when America itself was struggling, making it not just a minting error but a piece of cultural storytelling, and this layer of meaning adds to its mystique, making wealthy collectors willing to pay millions not just for the metal or the error but for the story it tells. And when it comes to describing possibilities, one can imagine how errors like broad strikes, clipped planchets, off-center strikes up to 50%, or even double strikes could exist within the 1930 D series. And any coin exhibiting those would instantly become a holy grail, and even coins with subtle errors like die polishing lines or weak strikes due to overused dies can be magnified in importance when combined with more obvious repunched marks. And with all of these together, the value soars, because each coin is essentially one of a kind, and collectors thrive on uniqueness. And when uniqueness meets demand, prices skyrocket, reaching heights like $10 million. And though some may find it hard to believe a penny could be worth that much, the numismatic world is filled with precedent, as other coins like the 1943 copper penny and the 1794 flowing hair dollar have sold for millions, proving that rarity plus story equals incredible value, and the 1930 Dewey penny fits perfectly into that equation, because it is not only a product of eras but a representation of a transitional period in minting history, a symbol of flawed perfection, and a coin that continues to attract headlines, bidding wars, and fascination. So when we think about the 1930 Dewey penny valued at $10 million, we are really thinking about the convergence of history, artistry, accident, survival, and collector passion, a convergence that makes a tiny copper disc an object of immeasurable cultural and financial worth. And this is why every detail matters, every crack, every doubling, every misplaced mint mark, because they all contribute to the legend of this coin. A legend that ensures its place as one of the greatest treasures ever to come out of the United States Mint, and this endless fascination is what keeps the market alive, inspiring collectors to search through their jars, boxes, and circulation change in hopes of finding a piece of history like the 1930 Dewey penny, because even the smallest chance of discovering one is enough to spark dreams of fortune, legacy, and a direct connection to the past. And as we continue exploring coins like this, we understand that numismatics is not just about metal or money but about the stories mistakes can tell, stories that turn ordinary pennies into million-dollar marvels, and in the case of the 1930 Dewey penny, into a $10 million masterpiece that will forever remain a beacon of value, rarity, and human curiosity, reminding us that in the world of coins, no detail is too small, no error too insignificant, and no story too ordinary, because every coin carries the potential to change lives, redefine collecting, and capture history in the palm of your hand, making this 1930 Dewey penny one of the ultimate examples of why coin collecting is not only a hobby but also a treasure hunt where the rewards are as limitless as the stories coins can tell. And so this exploration into the errors, mistakes, and possibilities of this rare penny brings us to the realization that the magic lies not only in its monetary value but also in its power to connect people across generations through the universal language of history, rarity, and the human fascination with the imperfect made priceless. The fascinating world of rare coins does not stop at the 1930 Dewey penny because the journey continues with yet another unbelievable treasure from American numismatic history, the 1944 1-cent wee penny, a coin that in ordinary condition would only be worth its face value but because of extraordinary circumstances, minting errors, and fascinating historical context. This small copper cent has been valued at an astounding $7 million, making it one of the most legendary coins ever produced by the United States Mint. And to understand why this coin is so special, we must dive into the unique backdrop of World War II. For in 1943 pennies were struck in steel coated with zinc due to copper being needed for war efforts. But when 1944 came, the mint returned to the traditional bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. Yet during this transition something remarkable happened. Some leftover steel planchets from 1943 accidentally found their way into the 1944 coin presses, resulting in extremely rare 1944 steel cents. And these accidental coins have become some of the most valuable pennies in existence, selling for millions whenever they appear. But in addition to steel planchets, there were numerous other mistakes that took place during this chaotic wartime minting period, with dies being overused, repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and even off-center strikes escaping into circulation, creating an entire spectrum of errors that makes 1944 pennies an endless treasure hunt for collectors. And what makes the $7 million valuation so incredible is the rarity of certain combinations of errors. Because not all 1944 pennies are worth that much, only the rarest with distinct features like the 1944 steel cent in pristine uncirculated condition, or a 1944 bronze penny struck on a foreign planchet such as those intended for Belgian or Mexican coinage, which were being produced at the same time, making these transitional era coins incredibly scarce, and when these coins survive in mint-state condition they become once-in-a-lifetime discoveries, explaining why a wealthy collector would pay millions, because scarcity and uniqueness drive value in numismatics, and the 1944 penny is unique in more ways than one, since the historical symbolism of copper being used again after a year of steel makes it a coin of cultural significance as well, representing the resilience of the American mint during war, and when combined with physical anomalies such as doubled dies where "In God We Trust" or "Liberty" appears shadowed or doubled, repunched mint marks where a D or S shows multiple impressions, die cracks stretching across Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks, off-center strikes where the coin design is misaligned by up to 50%, or even broad strikes that expand the planchet beyond its intended diameter. The 1944 penny becomes a perfect storm of numismatic intrigue. And collectors crave such uniqueness, knowing that their coin is one of only a handful in existence, and thus the price climbs to astronomical levels, and beyond the technical minting errors lies the story, the fact that this coin is a product of wartime shortages, human mistakes, and technological limitations, all wrapped in a small copper disc, gives it narrative power, and in collecting, stories matter just as much as rarity, because collectors don't just buy metal, they buy history. They buy meaning, and they buy the chance to own something no one else can, and when all these factors come together, a $7 million price tag no longer seems outrageous. Instead, it seems like a fitting tribute to the uniqueness of this coin. And so the 1944 1-cent wheat penny continues to be one of the most iconic coins, a symbol of error turned into perfection, and a reminder that even during times of global conflict, mistakes at the mint can create treasures that future generations will cherish and fight over, making the 1944 penny one of the brightest stars in the galaxy of American coinage, a star whose light is measured not only in millions of dollars but in the endless fascination it inspires among collectors, historians, and dreamers who imagine finding one in their change, proving once again that in the world of coins the smallest details can yield the greatest fortunes. The 1944 1-cent wheat penny is one of those magical coins that keeps the imagination of collectors alive because while the average person might look at a penny and see nothing more than a small copper coin barely worth its face value, numismatists and dedicated treasure hunters know that hidden in the details of minting mistakes, alloy changes, and the chaos of war production lie incredible fortunes. And the 1944 penny embodies this perfectly, with certain examples commanding up to $7 million in value because of the unique set of circumstances that led to their creation. And to understand why this coin is so important, we need to look deeper into the exact events of 1943 and 1944. For in 1943, the United States Mint made the historic decision to shift penny production to zinc-coated steel in order to preserve copper for World War II ammunition, telephone wire, shell casings, and other essential supplies. And although the steel cents of 1943 themselves are popular collectibles today, they were not well received by the public back then because they rusted easily, were confused with dimes, and even stuck to magnets. So when 1944 came, the mint returned to copper-based pennies. But mistakes occurred when leftover steel planchets remained in the presses and were accidentally struck with 1944 dies, creating the ultra-rare 1944 steel cents, a coin that should not exist but does. And this accidental blend of years instantly made those coins some of the most sought after in history. But beyond just the steel cents, 1944 also saw a variety of other rare errors and mistakes, such as coins struck on foreign planchets because the Denver and Philadelphia mints were producing coins for Allied nations during the war. So some blanks intended for Belgian 2-cent pieces or Mexican 5 centavos were mistakenly struck with Lincoln penny dies, producing coins that look slightly off in color, weight, and size but carried the 1944 Lincoln design, and these mistakes are so scarce that they number in only a handful, making them multimillion-dollar rarities when discovered. And then we consider repunched mint marks, with some 1944 D pennies showing doubled or even tripled D mint marks, a result of the hand-punching method used at the time before the mint switched to machine placement of mint marks, and these repunches are visible under magnification, turning an otherwise ordinary penny into a highly desirable collector's piece. And then there are double die errors, where parts of the design such as "Liberty in God We Trust" or the date 1944 appears shadowed or doubled due to a misalignment of the working die, and such coins are often sold for thousands, but when combined with other unusual features can climb into the millions. And off-center strikes from 1944 also exist, with some coins showing Lincoln's portrait shifted dramatically from the center, leaving blank planchet space visible, and these errors, though not as rare as steel planchets, are still highly collectible, and when preserved in mint state condition can command impressive premiums. But the crown jewel remains the 1944 steel cent, particularly those struck in pristine condition with no signs of wear, as only a handful are known to exist, and each one is considered a once-in-a-lifetime find. And when these coins appear at auction, the bidding wars are ferocious because collectors know they are competing for one of the rarest modern U.S. coins, and in fact, the allure of the 1944 penny extends beyond its physical properties, because it represents the story of wartime America. When the mint was under pressure, resources were scarce, and small mistakes slipped through, mistakes that decades later would transform into treasures, and this story element adds to its legend, for collectors do not simply see a steel planchet or a doubled die, they see a tangible connection to history. A piece of the 1940s that tells of sacrifice, ingenuity, and imperfection, and this connection is what pushes collectors and investors to pay millions, because they are not merely acquiring a coin but a story, a symbol, a legacy. And that is why the 1944 penny has achieved mythical status in the coin collecting world, because it demonstrates that even the smallest coin, 1 cent, can be elevated into an object of unimaginable value when history, era, rarity, and condition converge. And that convergence is why this coin is valued at $7 million, because the combination of leftover steel planchets, foreign blanks, minting errors, and historical importance is so extraordinary that it defies the normal boundaries of numismatic valuation, and as the years go on, the legend of the 1944 penny only grows, with more and more people checking their change, searching old jars, and examining inherited coin collections in hopes of discovering one of these rare treasures, proving that the magic of coin collecting lies not only in the coins themselves but in the dreams they inspire, because for every collector who holds a 1944 penny in their hand, whether ordinary or extraordinary, there is always the possibility that they might be holding millions of dollars. The journey into the world of numismatic wonders takes us from the legendary 1944 1-cent wheat penny into yet another incredible chapter of coin collecting history with the 1945 wheat penny, a coin that at first glance appears ordinary but in reality hides stories, mistakes, and minting anomalies so profound that certain rare examples have been valued at a staggering $6 million. A price tag that transforms this small copper coin into an artifact of immeasurable worth. And to understand why the 1945 wheat penny is so valuable, we must first look at its historical backdrop, because by 1945 the Second World War was coming to an end, and the United States Mint was still navigating shortages, resource allocations, and immense pressure to produce coinage efficiently. And although by this year the mint had returned fully to the traditional bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, the lingering effects of wartime production still impacted operations, leading to an environment ripe for mistakes, and those mistakes are what gave birth to some of the most valuable era pennies ever struck, with examples that include doubled dies where lettering such as "In God We Trust, Liberty," or the date 1945 shows dramatic doubling, repunched mint marks where the D or S appears stamped more than once due to the hand-punching process used at the time, off-center strikes where Lincoln's portrait drifts significantly away from the center leaving blank planchet space, broad strikes where the coin's design stretches unnaturally due to improper collar pressure, and die cracks that leave raised jagged lines across the obverse or reverse, each of which can add substantial value. But the crown jewels of the 1945 wheat pennies are those struck on wrong planchets, because with the U.S. Mint producing coins for Allied nations during the war, planchets intended for foreign coinage sometimes slipped into U.S. penny presses, resulting in transitional errors where a 1945 Lincoln design was struck on planchets of unusual weight or composition such as silver, brass, or even foreign copper alloys, making these pieces instantly unique and nearly priceless when discovered. And just like the 1943 and 1944 cents that carry stories of steel planchets and foreign blanks, the 1945 penny also finds its place among the elite due to these extraordinary minting mistakes. But what makes its valuation climb as high as $6 million is the rarity of certain combinations. Because when you have a 1945 penny struck on a foreign blank combined with a visible double die or a repunched mint mark, the coin becomes a once-in-a-lifetime specimen, something so scarce that the collecting community is willing to pay astronomical amounts to secure it. And beyond just errors and anomalies, the story of 1945 itself adds to the mystique. Because this was the year the war officially ended with victory in Europe and Japan, and coins struck in this year symbolized not only monetary history but also cultural and political history, as they mark a transition from wartime economy to peacetime rebuilding. And when collectors hold a 1945 penny, they are holding a piece of that era, a token of resilience, and if that penny happens to carry unique minting errors, it becomes both a relic and a treasure, with narrative power that magnifies its financial value. Because collectors are not only chasing rarity, but also meaning, and the meaning of a 1945 penny is immense, since it bridges two worlds, the struggle of war and the promise of peace, and that symbolism combined with rare errors makes the $6 million valuation understandable, and the fascination with these coins extends into every collector's dream of checking their change, coin rolls, or inherited collections and stumbling upon a specimen that looks slightly different, perhaps lighter, perhaps struck off-center, perhaps with an unusual mint mark, and realizing it could be one of the multimillion-dollar rarities. And while the vast majority of 1945 pennies are common and only worth a few cents, it is those few extraordinary survivors that fuel the legend, proving that in numismatics the smallest mistakes can create the greatest fortunes. And that is why the 1945 wheat penny continues to be one of the most talked about coins among collectors, investors, and dreamers alike. Because it proves yet again that history, rarity, condition, and error converge to turn something ordinary into something extraordinary, transforming a humble 1-cent piece into a $6 million masterpiece of American coinage. And when we continue exploring the mystique of the 1945 wheat penny, we realize that its $6 million valuation is not simply a reflection of rarity in the technical sense but also the combination of numismatic desire, human storytelling, and historical timing that makes it extraordinary. Because while the mint produced hundreds of millions of pennies in 1945, only a handful carried the kinds of mistakes that catapult their value into the stratosphere, and those mistakes survive almost like accidents of fate, preserved by chance in jars, wallets, drawers, and boxes for decades until one day they emerge to astonish collectors. And this unpredictability is part of what drives the passion for coin collecting, because it reminds people that treasures are not always locked away in museums or bank vaults, but can be hidden in the most ordinary of places. And the 1945 penny especially embodies this magic, since many of its rarest errors are still being discovered today, with new varieties of double dies and planchet anomalies continuing to be reported, each one adding to the legend and fueling the possibility that more $6 million examples might still be out there waiting to be found. And when you think about the broader context, this penny also stands as a reflection of America itself during 1945, a year of triumph and change. A year when ordinary citizens held onto pennies because of wartime shortages, a year when a small copper coin represented resilience and unity, and the fact that errors from that year can be worth millions today almost feels poetic, as though history itself conspired to turn imperfection into perfection. And this is why collectors speak of the 1945 wheat penny with such reverence, because it is not only a coin but a bridge between past and present, a reminder that even the smallest object can carry the weight of history and the promise of fortune. And it is this duality of meaning and value that elevates the 1945 penny into the pantheon of American numismatic treasures, cementing its place forever as one of the most desirable coins in existence. The legend of rare wheat pennies moves forward in time and brings us to another astonishing chapter in numismatic history with the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that under ordinary circumstances might not attract much attention since it was struck in the San Francisco Mint in large numbers, yet because of the remarkable errors, minting anomalies, and unique survival stories tied to specific examples of this year, certain 1951 wheat pennies have become treasures of immense value, with the most extraordinary specimens being valued at an unbelievable $7 million. And what makes this particular penny so important to collectors is not only its relative modernity compared to earlier wheat cents but also the rich array of minting mistakes that occurred during its production, because by 1951 the mint was still using older hand-punching techniques for mint marks, meaning that misplacements, repunchings, and doubled impressions of the S mint mark are common, and when these errors appear dramatically they transform a regular coin into a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, with some showing clear doubled or even tripled S mint marks that instantly attract collector demand. And then there are double die varieties where inscriptions like "Liberty in God We Trust" and the date 1951 show shadow-like doubling caused by misaligned die hubs, giving the coin a ghostly, fascinating look that increases its rarity. And added to this are off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks that all contribute to turning specific coins into desirable anomalies. But what pushes certain 1951 wheat pennies into the realm of $7 million are the extremely rare examples struck on wrong planchets, such as leftover blanks intended for foreign coins or transitional errors where the wrong metal composition was used. And these anomalies make the coin not only rare but almost unique, because the San Francisco Mint at this time was occasionally producing coinage for other nations, so the accidental striking of U.S. pennies on foreign blanks was always a possibility, and when such a coin survives in high mint state condition, it becomes nearly priceless, because collectors recognize that they are looking at a once-in-a-lifetime piece, and rarity combined with condition drives value in numismatics more than anything else. Which is why the very best 1951 wheat pennies are valued at such astronomical levels. But beyond just the physical characteristics, the historical context of the early 1950s also adds significance, because America was coming out of the shadow of World War II and entering a new era defined by post-war growth, the beginnings of the Cold War, and a society rapidly changing in technology, culture, and politics, and coins of this era carry a symbolic weight as artifacts of that transformation. And so when a 1951 penny contains unusual minting errors, it is not just a coin but a story of a nation at a turning point, and this added narrative power contributes to its aura and its multimillion-dollar valuation, and the fact that most ordinary 1951 pennies are still worth only a few cents makes the discovery of an extraordinary error specimen even more magical, because it demonstrates the unpredictable nature of coin collecting, where the tiniest details like an extra S mint mark punch, a doubling in the date, or a slightly lighter planchet weight can mean the difference between pocket change and generational wealth, and this unpredictability is what keeps collectors searching through their old jars, rolls, and inherited collections, because there is always a chance that a $7 million treasure is hiding in plain sight, and the allure of the 1951 penny lies in this very possibility, a symbol of hidden value and the limitless potential of numismatics. Proving once again that a simple copper coin can carry stories, mistakes, and meanings far greater than its small size suggests. And that when history, rarity, and imperfection converge, even the most ordinary object can become extraordinary, transforming a 1-cent piece into a $7 million masterpiece that will forever remain one of the crown jewels of American coinage. And when we take a deeper look into the mystique of the 1951 wheat penny, we discover that what makes it so captivating to collectors and investors alike is the way in which its story embodies the unpredictability of numismatics. Because unlike coins such as the 1909 SVDB or the 1955 double die, which are widely known for specific varieties, the 1951 stands out precisely because its most valuable forms are born of rare errors that slipped through quietly, unnoticed at the time, only to resurface decades later as treasures, and this element of surprise gives the coin an aura of mystery, because no one knows exactly how many of these wrong planchet strikes, dramatic doubled dies, or extreme repunched mint marks still exist in collections, hoards, or even circulation, and that uncertainty is what drives the obsession. The idea that a coin worth $7 million could still be lying forgotten in a cigar box, an attic, or a dusty coin jar passed down through generations, waiting for a sharp-eyed collector to spot the subtle clues that separate an ordinary wheat penny from a fortune, and this hidden potential quality is what makes the 1951's penny so alluring, because it reflects the essence of coin collecting as a treasure hunt where mistakes become miracles and imperfections become perfection in the eyes of those who cherish rarity. And in this way the 1951's wheat penny cements itself not just as a coin but as a legend, a symbol of the boundless possibilities hidden in the smallest pieces of history, and a shining example of how a single cent can transcend its face value to become a $7 million masterpiece of human error and human fascination. The story of legendary wheat pennies continues with one of the most fascinating and mysterious coins ever to emerge from the U.S. Mint, the 1958 1-cent wheat penny, a coin that on the surface appears to be a routine late-date wheat cent from the Denver Mint, struck in enormous quantities as America moved toward the end of the wheat reverse design before switching to the Lincoln Memorial in 1959. Yet hidden among the countless ordinary examples are a few rare specimens that, because of unique minting mistakes, doubled dies, planchet anomalies, and survival rarity, have been valued as high as $5 million, transforming what most would dismiss as a common penny into one of the greatest numismatic treasures. And to understand why the 1958 wheat penny can be worth such an astronomical amount, we must dig into the details of its production and the minting process at the time. Because the Denver Mint in the late 1950s was producing pennies by the hundreds of millions, relying on high-speed presses and dies that often wore down or were misaligned, leading to a higher chance of striking errors. And among the known varieties, the most famous are the doubled dies, where inscriptions such as "Liberty, in God we trust," and especially the date 1958 show strong doubling, creating a bold shadow-like effect visible even without magnification, and coins with such dramatic doubling have always been among the most prized errors in American numismatics, with the 1955 doubled die already setting the stage a few years earlier for the enormous premiums collectors are willing to pay, and when a doubled die of 1958 appears, it becomes instantly legendary, because only a handful are known to exist, making them one of the rarest error coins of the entire wheat penny series. And in fact, scarcity is what pushes the price of certain 1958 double-die pennies into the realm of millions, because collectors crave what is nearly unobtainable, and when supply is limited to just a handful of known coins, demand drives the price into the stratosphere. But beyond doubled dies, there are other anomalies known in 1958 wheat pennies, including repunched mint marks where the D appears struck more than once due to the hand-punching process still in use, die cracks that create raised lines across Lincoln's portrait, or the wheat ears on the reverse. Off-center strikes that shift the design dramatically to one side, leaving part of the blank planchet visible, and broad strikes where the collar fails and the coin expands larger than intended, each of which adds to the coin's rarity and collector appeal. But the crown jewel remains the true double-die obverse, which is so scarce that it is counted among the most famous rarities in U.S. numismatics, and when a coin of such fame is combined with extraordinary condition, graded at the top of the mint state scale with full original luster, the price can climb into the multimillion-dollar range, which explains how the 1958 penny has achieved valuations of $5 million. And beyond the technical aspects, there is also a historical significance, because 1958 was the final year of the classic wheat reverse design, closing a chapter that had begun in 1909 with Victor David Brenner's introduction of the Lincoln cent and wheat stalks symbolizing prosperity. So any rare error from this year carries added symbolism as the last of its kind, a farewell to an iconic design before America transitioned into the modern memorial reverse. And this finality adds narrative weight to the 1958 double die, making it not only a rare error but also a historical bookend, and collectors love coins that tell stories as much as they love coins that are rare, because a coin that is both becomes priceless, and so the 1958 penny stands as a perfect storm of rarity, error, condition, and symbolism. A coin that turns the ordinary into extraordinary, the common into legendary, and the small copper cent into a $5 million masterpiece of American history, numismatic artistry, and minting imperfection. And it is this magic, the transformation of accident into treasure, that makes the 1958 wheat penny one of the greatest stories in all of coin collecting. The legend of rare wheat pennies does not end with the 1958 rarity, because the next chapter takes us into one of the most famous and dramatic discoveries in American numismatics, the 1969 double die wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks like a common late wheat cent from the San Francisco Mint, struck in a period when millions upon millions of Lincoln cents were produced. Yet this particular era variety has become one of the most legendary and valuable in history, with certain examples valued in the multimillion-dollar range and even climbing toward the $5 million mark depending on grade and provenance. And what makes this coin so unforgettable is the sheer boldness of its doubling, because unlike many doubled dies where the error can only be seen under magnification, the 1969 double die shows dramatic doubling on the entire obverse, with the inscriptions, Liberty, and In God We Trust, appearing so strongly doubled that it looks as if two separate impressions were struck into the metal, and even the date 1969 is boldly doubled, making the error unmistakable to the naked eye, which is one reason it has fascinated collectors ever since its discovery. But the story of its discovery is itself filled with drama and legend, because when the first 1969 double die pennies were found, many were mistakenly confiscated by the Secret Service, who believed them to be counterfeits, and only later did numismatic experts confirm that these were genuine U.S. Mint errors, and from that point forward their legend was cemented, because now not only were they rare and visually striking, but they also carried a story of government involvement, confusion, and eventual recognition, adding a layer of intrigue that makes them irresistible to collectors. And since only a small handful of confirmed authentic examples are known to exist, the scarcity alone is enough to propel their value into the millions. But when combined with their dramatic appearance, historical significance, and fascinating backstory, the 1969 double die becomes a perfect storm of numismatic desirability. And what makes it even more significant is that it was struck in the final decade of the wheat reverse design, meaning it represents not just a technical error but also one of the last great dramatic rarities of the classic wheat cent era. And because of that, its symbolism is magnified, making it feel like the mint saved one of its greatest errors for last. And collectors have always been willing to pay astronomical amounts for coins that are not only rare but also visually dramatic, because while subtle doubled dies may only attract specialists, a coin like the 1969 double die can be appreciated by anyone with a naked eye, and that universality adds to its appeal and value. And the fact that each surviving specimen is in relatively decent condition only increases the price, since any coin graded high mint state with full luster is essentially unique at auction, and auctions of these coins have repeatedly drawn worldwide attention, creating bidding wars that only fuel the legend. And when you combine all of these factors together, the visual drama, the extreme rarity, the fascinating government backstory, the historical timing as one of the last wheat reverse rarities, and the enduring demand, you arrive at a coin that comfortably justifies a valuation of $5 million or more. And this once again proves the central theme of coin collecting, that the smallest mistakes can create the greatest treasures, that a coin worth 1 cent in commerce can through accident, history, and human passion be transformed into a priceless artifact, and the 1969 double die wheat penny stands as one of the finest examples of this magic, a coin that embodies everything collectors dream of: rarity, beauty, story, and value. A coin that reminds us that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary treasures can be found, waiting for the right eyes to recognize their worth. And it is for this reason that the 1969 double die will forever remain one of the crown jewels of American numismatics, a masterpiece of error and legend that continues to inspire awe, hope, and the unshakable dream of discovering one in change.